Students, in today's class I would talk about strategy gap. What is strategy gap? Strategy gap refers to the difference between an organization's strategic plan and the actual execution of that plan. Thus, this difference between strategic plan and the actually whatever they commit, the actual and accomplished strategy refers to strategy gap. For example, I usually give this example of say there was a business, a construction business, and they said that by next year we would construct say 100 apartments, and they are not able to construct. So in that case, they should be completing a certain part of the work in certain time. But when, as per plan, they should have completed 70% of work in 6 months. But what happens is when they have a look at the exact plan and the exact situation that is in the completion of work right now, so they find that there is a huge difference. So that is called the strategy gap. There is a difference between the original plan and the strategy that they made and the original work that got completed. So why does this happen? It happens because of four reasons. One is lack of communication, one is sync between rewards and incentives, resource crunch, and time resource. So what happens is lack of communication. The most common reason for strategy gap is lack of communication between the top management and the organizational workforce with regards to the organizational strategy. According to the research, less than 10% of workforce is made aware of strategic plan. Thus, further, the strategic plan which is communicated generally lacks clarity. So what happens is, if the construction company is planning to construct 100 flats in one year, they should let the, at least, if not the laborers, they should at least let the supervisors know that this is the plan and this we have to stick to it, and then this way we would achieve the original strategic plan of constructing 100 flats in 1 year. But what happens is there is a lack of communication between the management and the laborer. So that lack of communication leads to strategic gap, because the staff that's working at L1 level, at the last level, that is just above the laborers, that the team that is working, the team of engineers is not aware of what is happening. Only the top leadership knows that okay, this is the strategy and we have to follow it. So that leads to a strategic gap. The second point is sync between rewards and incentives. It is a major reason for a strategic gap. According to Norton 2007, 70% of organizations do not align the incentives of middle level management to the success of strategic plan. So many firms wrongly link pay to short term performances. So what happens is, in order to motivate people, the middle level management is not aware of what exactly the strategy and what exactly the strategy is and where they are standing right now. So that leads to a strategic gap. The third point is resource crunch. Any grand strategic plan needs equally strong funds and resources, both financial resources and non-financial resources. According to researcher Norton, any good strategic plan which is not funded sufficiently is doomed to fail. Statistical information has concluded that only 30% of organizations sufficiently finance their strategic plan. So why does this happen? The resource crunch. Say laborers are not available, say They have other issues like the funds are not available. This is one of the main reasons, and then the laborers required for one particular job is not available at that particular time. So, for example, if they are into the last phase, that is last phase of construction, that is painting. So, if the painters are not available, the entire building has to be held. It has to, they just can't sell the flats. I mean, they can't call it as a complete project. So, the deadline is, they are still missing the deadline just because the last phase, in the last phase, the painters are not working and they don't find the painters. So, each and every resource is important. Apart from HR resources, we have HR. We also have this financial resources. If the financial resources are not planned well in advance, then that leads to resource crunch. And because of resource crunch, we usually see that there is a strategic gap. For example, if the laborers are not coming on time, if the laborers are not punctual, if there is a crunch of laborers in the market, then what happens is the exact plan that we made, the deadlines, we will miss those deadlines, and the the planned deadlines are very much. There is a huge difference gap between. So there is a huge difference between the planned strategy and the strategy that is implemented. The fourth thing is time resource. Again, the researcher Norton has proved that 90% of top managers spend less than 1 hour per day to discuss and focus upon the organization's strategic plan. This in turn would lead to strategic gap. Time is the key component resources that they need to spend on a regular basis upon the organization's strategic plan. So what do we mean by this? By this, I mean to say that the top level says that okay, we are busy with some other project, so we would not be able to discuss the strategic plan. We would not be able to discuss whether we are meeting the goals or not. So that leads to huge difference between the original plan and the and the work that is completed as on certain date. So strategy, I would again recap this by saying that strategy is a living thing. It needs to be constantly monitored and measured to ensure everything is on track. Periodically it should be revised. Typically this would be once in a year, or at least depending on the scenario. If the project itself is for 3 months, then it has to be reviewed for at least once in a week. So for strategic plan we have these, it is important to ensure that the time and the strategy is planned. It has to be realistic, it can't be like unrealistic. So we need to know, like overacting, we need to know the basic pain points where that can lead to the strategic gap. Strategic gap analysis is again a business management technique that requires an evaluation of difference between business endeavors and the best possible outcomes and the actual outcome. It includes recommendation on steps that can be taken to close the gap. Strategic gap analysis aims to determine what specific steps a company can take to achieve a particular goal. A range of factors including the time frame, management performance, budgeting constraint, all these are, like I have already discussed, these are all critical factors that lead to a strategic gap. Strategic gap analysis is one method that is used to help a company or any other organization to determine whether it is getting the best returns from its resources or not. It identifies the gap between the status quo and the best possible result. Like performing a strategic gap analysis can point to potential areas for improvement and identify the resources that are required for an organization to achieve its strategic goal. Strategic gap analysis emerges from a variety of performance assessments, most notably benchmarking. Benchmarking, what do we mean by benchmarking? It's a technique to assess the performance. When the performance of level of industry or the project is known, then the benchmark can be used to measure whether the company's performance is acceptable or if it needs an improvement. So such comparisons inform a strategic gap analysis. So this is all about strategic gap. I will discuss about the next topic, that is gap analysis in detail in the next lecture. Thank you.